Havdoloh. Baruch Hashem, we meet again. Bentsh refuah shlema to Nochem Ber ben Malka, refuah shlema. I'd like to share with you something which a fascinating journey which I saw in the Shul last night. Now the Shul was written about 300 something years ago, 350 years ago, probably. Dayan Levi Yitzchok Raskin. It's a combination of Kabbalah, Drush, rooster, Halocho. So he's got a section on Torah where he goes through the Parsha Torah, and each week he has some explanations on the Sedra. So I don't often browse there, but I was last night, early morning after Nittel expired, and I saw the following: that we have the story in this week's Parsha where Moshe meets this Mitzri goes out and sees this Egyptian taskmaster striking a Jewish slave, and Moshe sorts him out, and then he has to run off he runs away to Midian, the whole story. So the Shalom he brings from Arizal that Moshe is a continuation of the neshama of Hevel. We go back in history, we have Cain and Hevel. They have a fight, and one way, Cain murders his brother Hevel. The Moshe's neshama is the neshama of Hevel. Cain comes down in three forms: his nefesh, ruach, and neshama. His nefesh comes down in the Mitzri, who was killed by Moshe. His ruach, he says, comes down in Korach, and his neshama comes down in Yisro. So we have where Moshe, he sees this Mitzri, Vayachas ha-Mitzri. See, that was the way he was. It was Cain. It was Moshe, as in Hevel, settling the account with Cain, and that's Vayachas ha-Mitzri. This, once he's sorted out the nefesh of Cain, then he's able to travel to Midian to connect with the neshama of Cain, which is in Yisro. When he meets the daughters of Yisro, he helps them, drives away the other shepherds who are harassing them, and they come back to their father. Ish Mitzri hitzilonu miyad haroyim. We were saved by an Egyptian. So, and then Yisro says to his daughters, "Ve'ayoy, where is he?" The words Ayoy are the same words where Hashem says to Cain, "Ei hevelochicha," where is your brother? Ve'ayoy. And he says the double expression ve'ayoy, kind of the extra vov, he's wondering, is he just this plain Mitzri, or there's something deeper? Because I know there's some neshama connection here with this ha-Mitzri. If he's just a regular Mitzri, we'll give him some bread. If he is the ha-Mitzri who is connected to my neshama, well then, Dayan Levi Yitzchok Raskin will make a shidduch. When Cain and Hevel were fighting, well, the fight was, I say they were fighting, it was a one way, but it was because there was a twin. There was a twin sister, and there was the argument who will marry that sister. So when Moshe goes to Yisro, after having sorted out the nefesh of Cain, as in the ha-Mitzri. Now the word ha-Mitzri is gematria 345, which is the same as Moshe. Now, so when he says, when he comes as the Egyptian man, the guise of the Egyptian man, well, he's sorted out and he's used a shemmab to kill the Mitzri. He's elevated his nefesh, and now he is coming along as ha-Mitzri, and he's meeting up with Yisro. Yisro gives his daughter. Well, that is Cain surrendering the daughter, so to speak, or the twin, the daughter, that's Tzipora. And he says, a fascinating thing, Moshe, when he was a baby, he refused to suckle milk from a non-Jew, a Jewish woman. And here he's marrying a daughter of a priest of idol worship. Now, this was the destiny which he had, to marry the daughter of Yisro stroke Cain. And so you have there, they're back in Parshas Brachos, Ki Shiva Osaim Yukam Cain. Yukam is a Rosh Tevis. He mentions Yisro Cain Mitzri, or you can say it's Yisro Koirach Mitzri. And so Moshe is dealing first with the Mitzri, then he's able to relate to Yisro and to connect, and that's how Yisro kind of is the bearer of Yisro. And it was another interesting thing which Hashaloh doesn't spell out, but you have the idea of nefesh, ruach, and neshama. So nefesh is in ma'aseh, ruach is in emotion, and neshama is in seichel. The challenge with the Mitzri was a challenge on the level of ma'aseh. The challenge with Yisro, or the engagement with Yisro, is very much on the level of seichel. So it fits perfectly with this idea. Listen, I'm just giving you a little bit of a whole fascinating journey which he has there with gematrias and with similar words, etc. It's a fascinating thing. It's just where we see the familiar story, but
where
there's
is it?
More to that.
Which sefer?
In Parshas Shemos.
Which?
In the Shalom in Parshas Shemos. In this week's Sedra. Okay, let's start off, though. This was just a little hakdama. Let's go on to our shiur of the halachos. Okay, so this past week, London was clouded over, as were other parts of London, of England, and there was a struggle to find to be able to say Kiddush Levono in time. There's a time which is written on the luach, on the calendar, which is it says Sof Zman Kiddush Levono, and it was all clouded over practically. There was apparently a little short window somewhere, but most of the time it was clouded over. So many people did not manage to say Kiddush Levono in time for Motzei Shabbos, and I had been asked, and it said it's okay to do Kiddush Levono the following day, and I'd like to explain myself where I'm coming from. So perhaps I'll start off with the story, and then we'll go to the halachos. The story here you have is a diary of Reb Yankov Landau, who later became the Rov of Anash, and this is from Tov Reish Ayin Tes. It's the eve of Motzei Shabbos, Shalach, Yud Ches Shvat. Now I checked in the calendar, Shabbos was Yud Zayin, and this is Motzei Shabbos. So he tells the following: some of Anash, myself included, had not made the Kiddush Levono. Friday night, which is the night in going into Yud Zayin, there was a visible moon. I went in after the Maimer, the Rebbe had said a Maimer that evening of Oz Yoshir, and during the meal I went in to ask the Rebbe, should I do Kiddush Levono? The Rebbe says, oh, there's a whole long discussion about this. Reb David Oppenheim, he has a tshuva, he has a way along the discussion about this, and he is of the opinion that you should do Kiddush Levono, that's on Friday night, if it works out. However, the Shvus Yaakov says no. For Reb David Oppenheim, there's a lot about this, and he says it's not a problem of tchumin, of it traveling more than 2,000 amas, and all the tefillas are going where they're going. However, the Shvus Yaakov is quite apathetic about this, and he says, no, you should not do Kiddush Levono on a Friday night. So, says Rabbi Lander, I said to the Rebbe, that's all on the question of Shabbos. But here's another issue, that's already now after the Zimun. The Rebbe says, today is after the Zimun. And he starts thinking, calculating how long is it since the Moilad, which is a new moon. The Sof Zman Kiddush Levono had been already, the latest time for Levono was Leil Vov, which means, I guess, that means Thursday night. So this is Friday night. So Rabbi Yankel Lando says, if we see a nice Levono tonight, it's Friday night. And the Rebbe says, oh, already wait till tomorrow night. And he recalls the Meister with his father. One time they made Kiddush Levono, it was the 17th Mes Les, the 17th 24-hour period of the month. So they did make Kiddush Levono the 17th Mes Les. Shabbos is Epis, I've never seen this. There was once in Lubavitch, it was after my father had passed away, the people made a Kiddush Levono the second night of Sukkot. I had made Kiddush Levono earlier. I had seen it earlier. I was Mekadosh Levono, but most of the people hadn't been Mekadosh Levono. They did it the second night of Sukkot. And he says the name of the Rov who told them what to do. However, Madievsky, that was one of the Rabbonim at the time, close to the Rebbe Rashab, Rabbi Madievsky had testified that Rabbi Sonoach had told him that Mekadosh Zayin to make Kiddush Levono the second night Pesach. No, is the Shabbos the same thing, same reason. But I've never seen that we should make Kiddush Levono Shabbos. And it's taka shver. He says taka, it's awkward. This was a story with my father, the 17th was less, so kind of a bit repetitive. And we got up very early and we were in Kiddush Levono. My father, the Rebbe Marash, used to always get up very early. And we were awoken. We had a person on guard, a sentry on guard. There was five-ish. He was like the sentry, the guard. And we had Yiddish Starozhen. We had Jewish guards, sentries. And we got up very early and we were Kiddush Levono. So he says, better leave Kiddush Levono for tomorrow night. Tomorrow night is still in the 17th Misles. The Moiled was 12 o'clock. So you can make the Kiddush Levono tomorrow night also. That's going into the 18th of the month, yeah? And then he goes on, he says, for the 16th of the month is discussed in the Heishiv Moshe. It's a slight mistake, it's Heishiv Moshe. Heishiv Moshe is a Shuvah Sefer from the Yismach Moshe. He's the kind of the ancestor of the Satmar dynasty. But then the Rebbe says, I remember they once went out with this for him. So my father, the Rebbe Rashab says, that was Gorshpit, very late. Yeah, that's true. So, and then Rabbi Yalander says, I said to the Rebbe, on tachbulas without any tricks, perhaps reading from a Gemara, from an Alphas. So the Rebbe said, no, on tachbulas, no tricks. For the 17th, you don't need to have tachbulas. Sorry. To be able to use from a sefer, that's not limited to the 17th, that can be even late. So here you have a fascinating conversation and record, which Rav Landau records, and how the Rebbe Rashab had okayed saying Kiddush Levono the eve of the 18th because it's within the 17th 24-hour period since the moment. So I want to explain. So this is the story, and of course it is very surprising. And so here's the story. Here's the Gemara. The Gemara about Kiddush Levono is in Sanhedrin Mem Aleph. V'yomar Rav Acha bar Chanina, that's to the right of your page. Omar Rav Asi Omar Rav Yochanan, Ad kama mevorchin al hachodesh. Until when can you say the bracha on the new moon? And he answers, Ad shetismale pegimosa, to the when until the recess, so to speak, the dent is complete. Via v'kamo, until when? So Rav Yaakov Bar Idi says, in the name of Rav Yehuda, Ad Shiva till the 7th, Nehardoi Amri Ad Shisha Asar. One says till the 7th of the month, one says to the 16th of the month. But Arvayuk Rabbi Yochanan Sfira Lahu, both of them follow Rabbi Yochanan, who says about the dent being filled. The question is, are we talking about a crescent becoming a semicircle? That is kiyastra, like the bow that you have to. It was like a bow, and now it's filled in like the string of the bow. In other words, like a semicircle. The homelem hevekinafio. The other one is saying it should be a full circle. So we have one opinion which says one opinion says like until the 7th of the month. That's when it's the semicircle is complete. The other one says until the 15th of the month, until the 16th. So this is the way it is in the Gemara. So the Gemara says until the 16th. The Gemara is brought la halacha. This is now on the left of the page. We have here the Shulchan Aruch and Siman Tov Chavav. Ad Emosai mevorchim aleho ad shisha oso yoim mim yoim hamoilad v'loy shisha oso bichlal. So first of all, the Shulchan Aruch paskins till the 16th, but he says 16th, but not the 16th itself. Not v'loy shisha oso bichlal. So when it says ad shisha oso, that's ambiguous. Does it mean until the 16th, inclusive or exclusive? So he says it doesn't include the 16th. He also adds another important point. Are we talking about the day in the month, or are we talking about how many days since the moilad? And as you may know, sometimes the moilad can be a day or two before Rosh Chodesh. So when we talk about the latest time for Kiddush Levono, are we counting from the Rosh Chodesh, or are we counting from the actual from the moilad, from the rebirth of the month? So the Machaber says miyoim hamoilad, and the Machaber is taking a very simple understanding of the Gemara, that you've got the moon. The moon is very small, and then it starts waxing, and then it reaches to its highest, its biggest moment. And once it starts waning, then you can't do Kiddush Levono. That's the way he understands. And therefore, he says, not the 16th, 15th. He also says it starts, you count from the moilad. The fact that there was a moilad a day or two earlier means the latest date for Kiddush Levono is also going to be earlier. Fine. That's how the Mechaber paskins. Not everyone paskins like the Mechaber. There are numerous Rishonim and Achronim. Mentioned before, you saw the Rebbe Marashab mentioned the Heishiv Moshe. There's also Rameh Mifano. There's a Chuvah Chassam Sofer. There's a story in the Chassam Sofer. I think it's I read it on Friday. Kuf Beis, I think, in Erechaim, where there was a community. They were very concerned that they hadn't done Kiddush Levono, and last time when they hadn't managed to Kiddush Levono, there had been some kind of epidemic, and so they were very concerned this time. And the Rov allowed them to make Kiddush Levono the following night. And then Chassam Sofer he agrees with him. It's okay to do up to the 16th. In other words, although the Shulchan Aruch says not the 16th, only the 15th, Chassam Sofer kind of goes along with him under the circumstances. Then we have there's a well-known series of Sforim called Knesses Havdoloh, written by Reb Chaim ben Vinesti. He's quoted very extensively by the Mogen Avraham. He also wrote a sefer on Sanhedrin, on Gemara Sanhedrin, called Chamra V'Chaya. It's like a Shita Mekubetzes on Gemara Sanhedrin, and he writes the same thing actually in both of these sources, both in Chamra V'Chaya and in Knesses Havdoloh. He writes the following. He writes, well, you have that's the second quote on the left side of your page. Sorry. So he writes the following, that then Havdoloh had said till the 16th. He quotes from Chidushi Rabbeinu Talmidei Peretz, and then he quotes the Meiri, who says that Ad shetimole pegimoso v'ta'ase kenofo v'hu yoim yud zayin b'chodesh. When does it become filled? That's the Yudvov, sorry, the 16th of the month. So when it says in the Gemara the 16th, it means the 16th, and it means the 16th of the month, not the 16th from the Moilad. And so what they're saying is, what the Meiri is saying, that instead of just looking at the the cycle of the moon, look at the onlooker. When you look at the moon, do you see a full moon? Do you see it already reducing? And therefore, you could say that the 16th, although you don't see, although the moon has started to wane, but it's not noticeable. Because it's not noticeable, therefore you can still say Kiddush Levono. So when the Gemara, so this halachic is saying, this approach is saying that the 16th is still the Levono. You don't see you don't notice the diminishing of the Levono. Therefore, you can still say Kiddush Levono. So that explains the Gemara which says 16, but that doesn't explain the Rebbe Rashab talking about the 17th. So I've got a simple explanation. As I said before, sometimes the moilad is bang on the day of Rosh Chodesh. Sometimes the moilad is a day earlier. Sometimes even more. Usually, it's either on the day or a day earlier. The Gemara says until the 16th of the month, you can still Kiddush Levono. And what happened if the moilad was a day earlier? You can still say Kiddush Levono. Which means that even it's the 17th from the moilad, it's still not considered a blemished moon. It's still considered a full moon. That's the basis of 17th. Even if it's the 17th misless, until that's the test Zion can be translated into Yud Zion, because it's very often that the moilad is a day earlier, and you can still do Kiddush Levono. He said, right, the 17th is still safe. So that's the story with the Rebbe Rashab. It goes back to the Rebbe Marash also. So we've got, I think, strong basis to be made. So it's not such a well-known story, and fine. But I think in the circumstances, we can rely on it to do Kiddush Levono on the 17th, misless, which is very clear. All right, okay. Last week, we're going to another thing, new question. Last week, came up a discussion about the Morning Brochos, and so one of our listeners listening to the recording, we spoke about, I think it was, we spoke about, can you say the Brocho, she'osuli kol tzorki? I mentioned that if you get up before dawn, you should not be saying a Brocho, she'osuli kol tzorki, unless you're wearing leather shoes. That's what I said. So our listener, he happens to get up regularly, very early, before dawn, and he has a cup of coffee, says Brochos, has a cup of coffee, and then he goes and does his shiurim, etc. So he says, what's the story with the Brocho on the rooster? Yeah. So let's read the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe. Alter Rebbe's Lashon here is in the Siddur, which in every Chabad Siddur, it's there, almost. He says like this. He said, these Brochos, the next, 15 odd Brochos, talking about if you were awake a whole night, if you didn't change your clothes, if you're awake a whole night, you should only say these Brochos at dawn. Now, what's relevant for us? Avolim yoshan balaylo. If you did go to sleep, and you woke up, obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be saying Brochos. V'nischayev bohen, and you did become obliged in that particular Brocho, yochel levorach miyad shenischayev bohen. As long as it's from chatzos eilach. So now, again, if you get up after chatzos, it's before alos hashachar, and you put on shoes, you can say shosli kol tzorki. So if you heard a rooster, for some reason, you could say the Brocho, hanos nasach vivino. But it's only v'nischayev bohen. He says, imnei kol alaylo, and if you heard a tarnagol from chatzos, then if you heard the Tanagol, then you could say the Brocho hanos nasach vivino. But if you heard the Tanagol before chatzos, you cannot. But meanwhile, what we're seeing here is so let's explain something. After dawn, you don't need to wear leather shoes, and you don't have to. You slept in your clothes. You can say those Brochos, because after dawn we say you go according to minhag shel olam. Since it's minhag shel olam, since the norm is people get up at this time and they're getting dressed and they're putting on shoes and this and the other. Therefore, you can say all the Brochos. The complication is when you are before dawn, when most people are still tucked under their quilts. So you can't follow minhag shel olam. then you would only say the bracha if you personally had that experience. You got dressed, you put on shoes, you say Asuli Kotzorki, heard a rooster, you could say the bracha Now here the Chiddush is that if you heard a rooster long before dawn, you heard it in the middle of the night, the Alter Rebbe says you can make a bracha. That seems to be more based upon Kabbalah, that there is in Chazal they talk about a rooster crowing even at midnight also, and that's all right, but this is another discussion. Let's move on. The question which I have here is, someone had joined in, he was by a wedding, and for some reason he had to bench early. And then he was delayed a bit, and now he can be party to the Zimun. So his question is, now there's a letter of the Rebbe about people going to weddings and benching early, and because when they sat down to the meal, they anticipated that they wouldn't be able to stay till the benching, and therefore they didn't commit themselves to be part of the Zimun. But fine. Meanwhile, he's there. He's asking, should he say Baruch She'achlenu Sheloi, or should he say, if you are present at the Zimun and you didn't join in the eating, then you say Baruch She'achlenu. If you did join in, you say Baruch She'achlenu. He's already benched. Does he say Baruch She'achlenu or not? So this was the question I was asked at the beginning of the week. I've got a bit of a cough. I had a question this week. If someone had a drink of water, if they're thirsty, it says that you make a bracha shahakal, yeah? So someone asked me a question. It's a cute question. There is a din if someone pays your debt, and you made a neder not to have benefit from them, they paid your debt, that's okay, because it's only mavriach harim in a chasav. It's like driving a lion away from your premises. So he asks, when you're thirsty, so there's a threat. The thirst is bothering you. When you take a drink, it's driving away the thirst. So how can you make a bracha on the drink when you're thirsty? It's only driving away the thirst. It's not called a hanoah. That was his. And the answer is a very simple one. That is when you are mavriach arim nechse chaveiroi. When Reuven drives a lion away from Shimon, then that's not called a hanoah for Shimon. But if Shimon drives away a lion from himself, that is called a hanoah. That's called mavriach arim me'atzmoi is called a hanoah. So if someone can bring me a glass of water, I'd appreciate it. Okay. So now let's come back to our topic here. So you have here three people. So let's read the Shulchan Aruch. You have three eating together, and one of them forgot to eat bench on his own. So they've lost the Zimun. Thank you. And then he says, you've lost the Zimun. If one of the Zimun had made Berchas Hamazon on his own, the other two can still use him for their Zimun, and they can answer. And v'yochilanu is Baruch She'achlenu, afal pi shelo yochal klum achas shebech Berchas Hamazon. The fact that he benched does not preclude him from saying now Baruch She'achlenu, because he did eat together with them. Therefore, he is able to answer Baruch She'achlenu. So let's summarize that one. You're at a chasna, and for some reason you felt the pressure that you need to bench and leave, and then they do bench and do zimun, and you're still there in the room, and you want to answer. So the answer, you do answer Baruch She'achlenu. In this case, would be Baruch Elokeinu She'achlenu Sheloi. Baruch Elokeinu She'asimcha b'moyne She'achlenu Sheloi. So you would say Baruch She'achlenu, even though you've benched already, and perhaps that was a bit premature, but you did eat, and therefore you are able to say Baruch She'achalnu. I think it's very straightforward. Okay, let's go on to the next halacha, next question. Very, very interesting. So here, I was discussing about the case of a second marriage. Let's see where we have the Shulchan Aruch here now. Okay. Go back. Right. So this is a halacha, a regular first marriage. We have 7 days of Shivas Yemei HaMishta, 7 days of celebration. On each of those 7 days, if there is a group of people eating together and there is a Panim Chadoshes, so we say Sheva Brochos. What about a Zivug Sheni, a second marriage? So the halacha is, if the groom, for him it's the first time he's gotten married, and if the girl is a Basula, the Kala is a Basula, if he's a Bocher, or if she's a Basula, you can do 7 days. If he is not a Bocher because he's been married before, and she is not a Basula, so then it's only Yoim Echad. The question is, how do you work out the Yoim Echad? Because, very practically, let's say you do the wedding, the Chupah, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the Suda will be at 7 p.m. At this time of the year, well, one is going to be Yud Ches L'Chodesh, one's going to be Yud Tes L'Chodesh. It's changed the date. We changed the date at sunset or nightfall. So the poskim recommend that you do either the chuppah and the meal during the day, or you do the chuppah and the meal at night. That's the simple advice. Kiddush Shulchan Aruch, the Siman Kuf Mem Tes, says that if the meal started by day and overflowed into night, then you can still say Sheva Brochos. I'm discussing this because I want to share with you a klal about Kiddush Shulchan Aruch. Kiddush Shulchan Aruch is a very popular sefer. Kiddush Shulchan Aruch is not just abridged Shulchan Aruch. He's giving his own Piskei Halacha many, many times, but he's got 3 main foundations, 3 main sources. It's either the Alter Rebbe, the Rab sections in the Kiddush Shulchan Aruch, mamish word for word from the Alter Rebbe. His Keses HaSofer is straight out of the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, for example. Kiddush Shulchan Aruch, many pieces are straight from Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. He also uses Derech HaChaim from Yaakov Lister, and he uses the Chayi Odom or the Chochmas Odom. Chayi Odom, Chochmas Odom was the same person. He was Rav Avram of Danzig. He was the Rav in Danzig. Danzig is now known as Gdansk, the port city in Poland. And he wrote like a Kiddush Shulchan Aruch, but obviously the Kiddush Shulchan Aruch much more popular. What I want to say is, when you find a Chiddush in Halacha in the Kiddush Shulchan Aruch, unless he himself says where he got it from, it's going to be in one of those 3 sources. So the Kiddush Shulchan Aruch says this big Kiddush that even though it has to be on the same day, but if it started on the same day and it overflowed into the night, it's okay. You can still say Sheva Brochos. I was intrigued to find where he got it from. And yes, I actually managed to trace it to the Chochmas Odom. So here you have on the screens. Let's read through this now. Ad kam mevorchim. Until when can we do the brochos for a wedding? If for him it's a second wedding, for her it's a second wedding, it's only on the first day and the first feast. If they had several times on the same day or several feasts, no, only the first feast. Then the third line he says, if they did, if let's say they made the chuppah by day and the meal by night, there's a doubt whether you can make Sheva Brochos because now you've switched the day. I'm skipping down to the bottom, the third line from the bottom. He says, if they started the first meal before nightfall and it overflowed into night, then you can say Sheva Brochos. So this Psak of the Kitzur is written here in the Chochmas Odom. You've got a fascinating source. You see in the middle, he had quotes the Mogen Avraham. You know, we don't make a chasana on Yom Tov, not even Chol Hamoed. Why not? Because of a concept of Eima Arvin Simcha B'Simcha. One of the reasons we Eima Arvin Simcha B'Simcha, that you don't confuse the celebration of Yom Tov and the celebration of a wedding. So you don't have Eima Arvin Simcha B'Simcha. So you ask the question. Years bygone, it was very common to make weddings on Friday. I think I may have discussed this once on in this forum. It was very common to make weddings on Friday. There's a tshuva in the Ramah that he talks about where he made, there was a orphan girl who was getting married to someone, and there was some discussion about the dowry, and uncle had promised, and then he just stepped down, and and the wedding was delayed well into Shabbos. And he made the Chupah Friday night. It was already Shabbos, and he explains his basis for doing that. It was common to make weddings on Friday afternoon, and then they would have the feast at home, and however they worked it out. It was very common. What about Erev Yom Tov? How about doing I'm sure that some of the balabostas are about to faint. Erev Yom Tov. Mehr Feldenish. They make a Chupah Erev Yom Tov. But the question was, make a Chupah on Erev Yom Tov, and then the Yom Tov meal would. So the Mogen Avraham says a fascinating thing. He says that the feast by night will be the simcha of the chasana. Ein marvin simcha b'simcha. You can't make a chasana meal during Chol Hamoed. You can't make a chasana meal in the Yom Tov night. Sheva Brochos during the week, that's okay, because the main celebration is the first meal, the first feast. But the first feast should be on the night of Yom Tov. It goes into a violation of Ein Marvin Simcha B'Simcha. Says the Chayodom, Chochmas, if that's the case, so the same thing if it's a second wedding. So you're saying that you can't make the feast the night of Yom Tov because it's the celebration of the chasana, the main celebration. Or okay, on that basis, at least you should agree that if the Suda started by day and overflowed to nightfall, after nightfall, you should be allowed to make Sheva Brochos at night. That's his Kiddush, and as I say, the Chayodom this Chochmas Odom is the basis of the source for the Kiddush Levono. I'm not totally. It's got a very nice argument, but there's a Chumrah and here's a Kula. So I think the advice still remains. I think that's the general advice. Either you make everything by day, including you bench before Shkia, or you make everything by night. But what we have gained is also, in addition to the general information of the policy of the Kiddush Levono, but it also, if there is such a case and it is overflowing, is running into Shkia, one doesn't have to start getting too frantic because there are plenty of poskim who allow if it overflows also. Okay. I have here some comments on the chat. Thank you. I was just told a source of making a bracha when you are thirsty, on a bracha on a glass of water. Someone comments whether was the Chayei Odom written by the behest at the behest of the Vilna Gaon to counteract the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch. I highly doubt that. I know that there was Chassidim had some ambivalent attitude to the Chayei Odom. That's true. As Chassidim or Bechal have got a sense of humor also. So why did he call the name Chayei Odom? Because he didn't want them to make a kitzur of it, because it would look kitzur Chayei Odom, which means shortening the life of a person. So there's these Chassidish jokes about it. Both of you don't make sense, because the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch was only printed posthumously in Tov Kuf Ein Vov. The Gra passed away 20 years earlier, so I don't know you even knew that the Alter Rebbe had written a Shulchan Aruch. Yeah, that's one thing. The other thing is that the Kiddush Shulchan Aruch was written much later than the Chayei Odom. Therefore, to say that he was anxious about his sefer being made into a kitzur, it wasn't so fashionable to make kitzurim at his time. So it's a nice joke, but that's it. Fine. Let's move on. Okay. Also, last week we had this story about the fellow who wanted to switch on the kettle, the Shabbos urn, just before Shabbos, and we said it's not allowed. So following on from that, I was asked that we're having company Friday night. May we put raw chicken in the oven and open the oven 2 hours later? So let's explain very, very clearly. To leave food to cook on Shabbos has to be goruf v'kotum. There has to be some statement that it's not a normal cooking situation. That's what the blech, to cover the fire, is reminiscent of what they used to take a handful of soot and of ash and throw it over the embers. That's called kotum. There's some statement that is not business as usual, not cooking as usual. In an oven, I don't know what you can do to make it goruf v'kotum. What you're going to do? The oven, I don't know what you can cover in an oven. I don't see the practicalities of it. So it's just putting in a chicken in. Now there is a halacha that if you put up raw meat, mamish before Shabbos. Now, so what's he saying over here? Then you don't need goruf v'kotum. And he says that, yeah, this is the halacha which you have in Shulchan Aruch. You put up raw meat, it's chai legamri, and you put it in the oven, it's not goruf v'kotum. But the reason for that is, as you see very clearly, because since the meat is now raw, you're putting in raw meat, it's not going to be ready tonight. Just chill out. It's not going to happen tonight. It's not going to be ready for tonight. That's the heter of raw meat, where it's not going to be ready for tonight. But to put in raw meat or chicken, which cooks quicker, and our cooking systems are much more efficient than what they used to have, and it is going to be ready for tonight, then there's no heter to put it in raw unless you have goruf v'kotum. I know it's by 2 hours it's going to be ready without any problem. But you do have a chiyuv to put to have a grufa uktuma in place, and if not, you wouldn't be allowed to. An additional factor is that the din of chai legamri raw is only mamish just before chashecha, before nightfall. A woman normally benches licht 18 minutes, 20 minutes, 23 minutes. We discussed this before. So he did a little bit earlier. By the time you put it in, by the time you've lit your candles, etc., by the time shkia is going to be already cooked a little bit. So then the heter of chai legamri doesn't apply in any case. So really, this chai legamri is not really a reliable heter in our situation. And so, no, the answer is you cannot put in raw chicken in the oven and leave it closed for 2 hours. That doesn't work, Laloch. Okay, let's move on. So one of our regular listeners asking about asking the non-Jewish security guard indirectly to switch on lights in Shul. So here we have the Mirul Lenochri, such a big field, and there's numerous forum written on it. But one of the main areas in Siman Reishai involved, this is quoted from there. There are many places where they do allow instructing a goy to light candles in the house for the meal when it's dark, because it's not possible to eat in the dark. There are those who exonerated them to a degree because they rely on those who say that even to say so this is the shita of the Itur. The Itur was a contemporary of the Rambam approximately, and he has of the view that Amiru Lenochri, to instruct a guy to do a malacha for a mitzvah need, is permitted even if it is an absolute malacha. So according to the Itur, you would be allowed to tell a guy to light to switch on a light to be able to have your meal, because that's a mitzvah. But he says that's just a limit chus for those who are lenient. Each person should be machmir not to instruct a guy to light a candle, even though you're going to be as a result sitting in the dark and you can't eat Sudas Shabbos, because Rabu ha'oimri, the majority of the poskim say that shvus is not permitted ben kai mitzvah, only shvus dishvus. To ask a guy to do it for the rabbonon, but to ask a guy to switch to strike a match, that is the predominant view that that's not allowed. But devreim ikir. Therefore, when ein lahokil was klal bozeh afilu l'tzerech gadol, One should not be rely on this even for a great need. However, you don't have to be moiche for those who are mekel. Better they should be in blissful ignorance, in error, than to be sinning willfully. So, all right. So coming back to the realities here, you have sometimes in some shul, synagogues, etc., and the caretaker is switching the lights off and switching the lights on, and so that isn't okay, as we see the halacha. But it's not. We see here that you don't have to be moiche. Number one. Another useful thing: are you allowed to read by the light of which is generated in a forbidden way, as far as you're concerned? So, if it were pitch black, if without that light, then you'd have a problem of benefiting from that light. Many times, however, there is a little bit of light, whether from the windows, let's say during the day, or by night also might be a little bit of from the street lights, but especially during the day, in the shul during the day, maybe a bit of light, and this is increasing. So since it was possible to read even without the lights being switched on by the goy, then you are allowed to read because you're not benefiting exclusively from the malach of the goy. That would make life easier. Okay. Let's move on. So here was a discussion, one of the Bati Chabad here, about Kiddush. Is it essential for everyone to have a sip of the wine? So in many shuls, many synagogues, they prepare a tray with little cups of wine, and they go around, everyone takes a little cup, and then the one who makes Kiddush on a larger cup, obviously, and everyone else then sips from their wine in their little cup, which is prepared in advance. Is that correct? Can I hear a nod somewhere? Is that minhag? Okay. So they're not actually drinking from the very cup, the very wine which was used by the one who made the Brochos. Okay, but they are drinking. In Stamford Hill, in our shul, I make Kiddush at the Farbrengen, and actually most people don't drink from the wine; they just make mazonos. And so let's try to sort this out. So here we have from Siman Resh Ayin Aleph, the beginning of Hilchos Kiddush. Ein sorech lishpoich mikois hamekadesh lekoises yain shelifnei hamasubin. There's no need to pour from the leader's cup of wine to everyone else's cup. Hayotze rechevosen bishmio, who are yotze with the listening, unless they're pegumin, they have been tasted from. Then you have to. But otherwise, he says it's not essential that they drink they can have from their own cups of wine. And that is in the dinim of Kiddush. Now we have the dinim of Sheva Brochos, which is in Siman Kuf Tzadik, in the first volume of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. There is a preference, a greater mitzvah, that all those present should taste from the cup which is used for the brocha. It's not essential that they actually drink from his cup. It's okay that each one has their own cup, and when he makes the hagofa, and then they'll drink from their own cup. And he says actually there's an advantage of this because of pogum. Once he's drunk from the cup, then then for them to drink from it is a ma'aseh mit pogum. So that's a whole parsha on its own. What is the advised minhag to when you're making kiddush for your family? Should you first drink and then pour out to them, or should they drink from your cup? Or should you first pour off and then? I was brought up that my father would make Kiddush, and we passed around the cup. That was the meaning we had at home. I know that Rabbi Yochanan Klein alav shalom, he would be noyich to pour off. They make a finished Kiddush, pour off into another cup, and that would be what he'd give out to the rest of the family. And I'm sure he had good sources for that. So there's different minhagim about this. But meanwhile, what we are seeing is that the fact that everyone should have a sip of wine is a mitzvah min hamuvcher. It is a recommended thing, but they are yotze kiddush without it. We had an interesting thing this morning. This afternoon we had a bris in Shabbos dike bris, and what happens for kiddush? So the one who before they made the brocha just with the naming of the baby. So the announcement that this can also be serving for Kiddush, for everyone who wants to listen. The idea of Kiddush by day is that the meal starts off with the Be'er Priagofen. So here, the people are there. There's refreshments there. So long as the meal has started off with a Be'er Priagofen, so that's the general view of Poskim, that's good enough for Kiddush. I told them, people, the one who said the Brochos, he should say all the preamble. Dayan and Raskin, should say that before, but you can be Yotze Kiddush with the costs for Birchas Hamila. Someone's asking here, lighting candles is deraisa, turning electric lights on, most poskim is Rabbanon, especially LED lights. So shvus the shvus m'kei mitzvah. You're probably right. You're probably right that there is room to be more mekel. However, I want to say something that shvus, this Alter Rebbe is a chiddush, that shvus the shvus m'kei mitzvah is only allowed b'di'evet. Let me explain this. The second night of Yom Tov, to light candles, you need to have an existing flame. So people who don't have a gas flame, so they prepare a yortzeit candle. So for the second night, they can light from there. If you've got a goy helper, how about asking the goy to strike a match the second night Yom Tov? Striking a match in Yom Tov is Yisad Rabbanon, Shvus the Shvus, and it's Yisad Rabbanon, and Zamir L'Nochri, the Tzorich Mitzvah to do the Hadlokas Neiris. So we don't do that. So the Alter Rebbe says clearly, I think it's in Shin Gimel and Shut Kontrasachrin, that this Shvus the Shvus L'Tzorich Mitzvah is only allowed b'di'evet, not l'chatchila. So therefore, yes, you're right that telling the guy to switch on the lights, the tzarech mitzvah, if there was some mess up, yes, you could be mekel, because largely electric lights would be a bonus. The shvus tzarech mitzvah would be okay, but not to rely on that l'chatchila. Okay, now we have another message. We're going now back to Kiddush. Since Corona, I started to pour from my cup after the Brocho, before drinking, to give for the guests. I was worried about hefsek, so I stopped. It seems from this it's better even for family. It's certainly there's room to be to allow it on even a chatchila. Yes. Someone's asking, why should everyone drink? Male are the one doing kiddush, but should the others drink before eating mezonos, which has medina? I'm not sure medina what you mean by that. Okay, well, simply, we've seen here that there is a mitzvah min hamuvcha. People should partake of Kiddush Bracha. So if possible, they should partake. But they are yotze, they're yotze. Okay, let's move on.
I guess they don't have to say a bracha, a gofen, if they're yotze.
That's right, yeah. Let's move on. Then someone asked me about using a double-wick candle. So usually our Havdoloh candles are made of little candles which are folded over one another interlocked, kind of interwoven. That's the word avuka. Like you have the posuk by your ovik ish imay, they wrestled, they were interlocking. So that's the avuka. So mitzvah namuvcha levorich al avuka. It's preferable to say a bracha on avuka. Sheyesh bo eitzim harbe mo'oras harbe. The avuka has got. What's the advantage of saying on a avuka, which means a torch? That is because it's got lots of separate flames, and since we say the bracha boir me'oire ho'esh, he creates the various colors of fire. So the ribu me'oiris. So therefore, there is a preference to use a fire which has got several flames. But really, even if you had a single candle, you could also say the bracha boir me'oire ho'esh, because if you look carefully at a flame, you'll see harbi gevonen yesh ba'ur. Like B'Shama B'Shilel, famous sucha about this. If you look at the flame, you'll see there's blue and there's red and there's yellow. So shalhavas says yeah. So you've got the different colors. So therefore, the boir me'oire ha'esh, even in a single flame. But there is a preference to use a combination of several candles. Now, my question here is, or our question here, is there a difference between a candle with 2 wicks or a candle which is with several candles which have been braided together? That's the question. So let's read carefully. Let's see if we can come to some clarkite, some psak on this. If you've got two oil lamps or two wax candles and they're near one another to the point that their flames are connected with one another, so that's also putting two candles together is also considered avuka, because you've got several flames together. What would happen if you have the flames are not near one another, not joined? So you've got two candles next to one another, but they're not touching. The flames are not touching. So then that would not be called avuka. Then he says, but if you braided two candles, two wax candles, and you made them into one candle, then it's called avuka, even if the flames don't join, because they've become. So what the Alter Rebbe is saying here is a braided candle, even if the flames are not touching, that's called avuka. If they're two separate candles, it's only when the flames are touching. Coming back to the double braided candle, I think it does qualify as it does produce two flames. I have to look more carefully the next time. But if it does looks like there are two flames which are joined together, then that would qualify as avuka. Right. Someone is asking me about leaving a child with a non-Jewish babysitter. A Jewish babysitter has now given notice about leaving a child with a non-Jewish babysitter. So there is a thing about not leaving with a nochri because of chashash, a worry of safety. So there is a basic din in Shulchan Aruch, and we have here that you shouldn't leave. But then those who say that you don't have to worry about it because, especially where there's fear of the malchus, etc. Then there are those who backtrack on this, and you do hear of incidents here and there, and therefore you should be concerned. So we've got here different opinions, but so there is room to be makel. Let's move on. This is from someone is saying that going back to the wicks, if the wick is kafel shemo, it doesn't help you because it's still just one flame. When we're looking for that, there should be visibly two separate two flames which are working together. Okay, this is from the Sefer Nisivim B'Seach Shlichus, Volume 3. Discussed this over there. So Shlucha had asked me, she works a whole day in a school. She has a non-Jewish home help. Can she leave her alone in the house? So the answer which I've written there is, in the sources in the Sefer, there's a difference between a home help who's just doing cleaning and laundry, and then there's a type of home help you're going to entrust them to deal with the food. If she has a whole helper has no reason to touch the food, then she can be alone in the house, and you don't have to lock the food, you don't have to lock the kalim, you don't have to worry about that. With the exception, though, of the wine. Wine should not be left alone with a. When I learned this halacha, then I installed on my wine cupboard. I put in a lock. Wine is a separate chumrah. Shouldn't be left yichud with a nochri. Now coming back, if your helper is also dealing with the food, giving the children breakfast, etc., so she is working in the kitchen. She's going to be taking food in and out of the fridge, etc. In that case, would be an issue. And now we're dealing on the kashrus for the moment. We'll deal with the safety in the next thing. And it would only be acceptable if there's a yotze v'nichnas. It's from time to time, someone of the Jewish presence will walk in unannounced. Then that would be okay. But otherwise, to completely trust them with what's going on in your kitchen, that would not be okay. The second point which we have here, which is the main point on our list, leaving a child with a babysitter who's Eina Yehudis. So we do have a halacha in Shulchan Aruch about not entrusting a child, a talmid or talmida, to a moira nochri in a beifun kavua, to leave a child in the hands of a babysitter, of Eina Yehudis. It should be in a way of yotze v'nichnas. Finally, want to come back to a discussion we had last week about the naming of a miscarried fetus. It's very hashgacha pratis. We had the shiur was on Motzei Shabbos. On Sunday, on the website on anash.org, they had a booklet which had been released by tarsamishpacha.org or something in Crown Heights, for support for people who have gone through miscarriages. And so I looked at it, and there they had this thing which about giving a name even for an early unborn fetus. I was in contact with Rabbi Tuvia Kasimov, who was one of the authors of that booklet, and he says that seems to be the minhag which is accepted over there. But I have since seen in Nitei Gavriel, he gave me a reference to Nitei Gavriel, where there are different minhagim, whether to give a name for an unborn fetus, especially earlier on. And my concern was, if they start giving names, they may at a later date forget and want to use a name, and they may have used that already for a sibling, which we can't use twice the same name for siblings. We should finish off. I should only have simchas, the type of nirva nigla, and let's see the Ula Shlema, Telyo Hanovi, Vasa Hagula, Simchas Eilam Al Resham, Agutavoch, Kol Tov.